Dr. Catherine Zahn, of course, is the president and CEO of CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. She's a professor at the U of T Faculty of Medicine and a fellow and former board member of the American Academy of Neurology. She's passionate about integrating neuroscience and psychiatry, steering mental illness into the mainstream of medicine, finally, at last. Dr. Catherine Zahn.
Oh, so nice to see you again, Mark. It's been a long time, maybe 18 months since I was in your studio, and it was something like that. It was great to listen to your last two guests. I've been listening in, and going backwards, I can say that boy, I endorse everything that Howard said about emergency services, and we followed all of those principles when we created our new emergency department. That I hope you have a chance to come and visit sometime. And Lynn, oh my gosh, so many emotions and so many feelings about that. But I wanted to highlight something that she said about the issue of preventing what's the worst possible outcome of serious illnesses. And the first one is access to care. Even though there are treatments available, either people can't find their way to them, or they're not accessible. Education about suicide prevention, and last but not least, I can't overestimate the importance of a focus on research for treatment-resistant illnesses like depression and psychosis. That's the way forward for suicide prevention.
You know, I'm so glad that you picked right up on that point, because that's where I wanted to go here, was this idea that hospital-based care, and maybe other people have had different experiences, but my personal lived experience was that I didn't get better in hospital. It helped to stabilize me, and sometimes didn't. Sometimes, you're going into a system that is more broken than you are, and nobody tells you that at the time. But hospital-based care serves a very particular specific function within mental health treatment. And it doesn't always address, or often doesn't address, that more preventative side of the equation. Mm-hmm. So how have you seen, having been involved in the system now for a while, how has hospital-based mental health care evolved over the years to be more inclusive, to include preventative and community mental health?
Well, I'm going to go back again to Dr. Liu, who talked about the fact that the changes really reflect a transformation in assumptions that we make about mental illness, and in our understanding and our beliefs about mental illness. And he referred to the concept of recovery. And I would say that all of the things that have changed are driven by this understanding that people with mental illness can and do recover, and that the path to recovery is not institutionalization. It includes a goal of reintegration into family, into school, work, and for most people with mental illness, into independent living. Now it's interesting to talk about hospitals from the point of view of mental health care, because that's what we're talking about. But I think it's important to realize that hospitals have changed as well over centuries, since the Middle Ages, when they were TB and plague hospitals. But the fact is that we not only provide crisis and critical care, we also provide transitional care into the community. Many ambulatory services. We have services actually living in the community, and of course, something that's really been amplified in the last year is the availability of virtual and long distance services. So it's not a closed environment anymore. It's very porous. And you mentioned our emergency department is unique in being an emergency department that has a focus specifically on people in crisis with mental illness. So it's porous. People are able to get in better, and I have to preface that by saying we're far from perfect, but things are going in the right direction.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but you mentioned the history of it and the porousness of it. Of course, CAMH, and it's no secret because you've maintained this as part of your history. It used to be an asylum, a so-called lunatic asylum. You've maintained some of the old walls that used to be there, which I believe, I don't know if this is true or not, but the lore is that the patients built them to keep themselves in. And you've kept them there. So why is that important to remember our past, even as we continue to evolve into this more open system?
The north-facing walls onto Queen Street are gone, and again, part of that opening up of the organization to the community was to remove that. And in the most recent part of our redevelopment, there are pathways and streets that move into the organization. The walls aren't. The walls don't close off from the rest of from the other three places, but they exist as heritage sites.
Mm.
And I think when you understand, or you get to appreciate the difficulty and the fear that still surrounds mental illness, because there are so many unknowns and so many things we don't understand about the brain. Period, and mental illness is one of those issues. It's important to not pretend like the past didn't happen. Right, that difficult things happened, and we need to think about them, talk about them, understand how we've evolved, and what the pathway forward is. So it's a way to remember and to ground ourselves, but also dedicate ourselves to the future through in a number of ways, through our research and innovation, through our education, knowledge exchange, to really understand that we have a duty of care, not just to people who come to CAMH today or tomorrow, but those people today, but also in the future, and individuals who suffer locally, but also globally through our outreach initiatives.
And the redevelopment of the CAMH site, of course, has made the news repeatedly for the very progressive design, for the really beautiful structures that have been going up on the property. What is the importance, in your view, of environmental design in reconceptualizing what a hospital, a mental health hospital, should be?
It's so wonderful to have had the leadership position of CAMH during the bulk of the redevelopment of the campus. And for me, I would say that everything that has happened has been a strong metaphor for what we're trying to do internally. So again, the opening up, the respect and dignity, the articulation of the fact that people with mental illness are human beings with civil and with healthcare rights, and the physicality of the spaces should be reflective of that. It's interesting again to reflect on the fact that before my career at CAMH, I worked in general hospitals, and it would have been a given that one would want to create spaces that are soothing, calming, welcoming for people at their worst moment, at their worst hour, to support them through a crisis.
Mm. And often, it's shocking to me still that for so often, for most of human history, that isn't how people with mental illnesses were treated. They were often kept in squalor, in situations that weren't only not therapeutic, they were traumatic. So it really is quite heartening to see that how far we've come in a relatively short period of time, right? I mean, CAMH, the redevelopment project, hasn't been happening all that long.
Mhm. Coming up to, well, 15, 18 years now, and there are a few more years, a few more years to go before it's completely finished. But
Yeah.
but again, Dr. Liu pointed out the issue of changing people's understanding and attitudes as being so important. And you talked earlier about the stigma of mental illness, and I'd like to think. I like to talk about it, or I prefer to talk about it as prejudice and discrimination. And there's no question that the antidotes to prejudice are education and familiarity. So another function of CAMH welcoming in the entire neighborhood, the entire community, and is to create both of those key success factors: the opportunities for education and for familiarity with individuals who are not only ill in the moment, but who have recovered.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, I won't have time to do it, but I wanted to ask you about some of the groundbreaking research that's happening at CAMH. Of course, you're a research hospital with the largest in Canada. I don't have time to get into that with you today, but I do want to take some links to some of the research that's happening and put them out on our Twitter for the Bell Let's Talk feed so people can check out for themselves some of the really inspiring and interesting things that are happening. So we're going to make sure to share those on our social feed as well.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Dr. Catherine Zahn is the president and CEO of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. Thank you so much for joining me today.